just remind him that this Labour government has given the Scottish Parliament the largest real terms increase in funding since devolution. He should be grateful for it.
Rinda Jess.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Labour government has been in power for 6 months and we are having to deal with 14 years of Conservative chaos. Does the Secretary of State agree that the government's plan for change to provide a stable economy and to raise living standards in every part of the United Kingdom, with economic growth being the -- 1 mission, is the right approach to take to ensure that the United Kingdom can weather the global uncertainty that we are currently facing?
Quite right.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend is absolutely right. And look, this will be the difference the British people experience. At the end of 14 years of Conservative government, they had higher mortgages, higher bills, high cost of living, public services on their knees. At the end of this Labour government, pointing towards the next general election, as set out in the Prime Minister's plan for change, they'll have more money in their pocket, public services will be back functioning, and they'll be proud once again of their government and of the British economy.
Sir Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Listening very carefully to the Right Honourable Gentleman's responses, I believe he is making a more significant statement than many of his colleagues might realise, by underlining that there will not be any tax increases, there will not be any increases in borrowing. He is effectively saying austerity is back, because there is no way that the public finances can be remedied again by another budget of wishful thinking, pretending that increased borrowing and increased spending will produce growth, because that is once again being proved by a Labour government to be a false way of leading the economy.
Minister.
I'm always grateful that my honourable friend thinks I'm making such substantive interventions, and I'm grateful for his continued support on that. Look, this is not austerity. He will know full well that what is austerity? Austerity was ideological cuts to public financing in the size of the state. It was -3% cuts, irrespective of what that meant for particular public services or for people across the country. That is far from what the Chancellor unveiled in her budget in the autumn. It was the absolute opposite of austerity, as we increased financing into frontline public services and will continue to do so.
Noel Law.
Mr. Speaker, will the Chief Secretary outline the steps that this government has already taken to fix the fiscal foundations and put this country on a stronger footing for growth?
It's a very important question my honourable friend asked me, but why did we have to take that action? Why was the first bill of this government about fiscal responsibility? It's because of the mess that members on the opposite side of the House left this country, and that's why we've given the Office for Budget Responsibility stronger independent powers of oversight in statute, something that the Shadow Chancellor presumably welcomed given his comments when he was chair of the Select Committee criticising Liz Truss and her budget here in the House, something that we have brought forward, that the party opposite failed to do so. That's why we have set fiscal rules which are non-negotiable. It's why public services must live within their means, and it's why our absolute focus as a government is about securing growth, investment, reform and long-term sustainability for public finances in the long term.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Chief Secretary aware that the last 2 months' GDP figures for September and October both down? Is he aware that sterling is falling, almost collapsing? Confidence is falling. Investors are fleeing. The only things going up, Chief Secretary, is inflation, wasteful public spending and the cost of debt. We are heading towards, be under no illusion, a financial crisis. Will you ask the Chancellor to return from her ridiculous trip to China and reverse course? Cut daft spending, cut wasteful regulations in order that we can create some growth.
Minister.
I think the question, Mr. Speaker, was whether I was going to demand the Chancellor comes back from her trade trip to China. I won't, no.
Katie White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree there is an irony in the party opposite raising concerns about the cost of borrowing when it was their party that oversaw debt rising from 64.7% GDP to over 96% GDP, left a £22 billion unfunded black hole in the public finances, and now continues to oppose the tough decisions that we are making on tax and spend to fix their mess?
Minister.
This is exactly why, Mr. Speaker, our fiscal rules are non-negotiable. The party opposite borrowed to pay the bills every month because they didn't have enough money to pay for all of their promises, whereas this government is investing in the future of our country, whether that's about reforming public services or investing in infrastructure and opportunities for growth. That is exactly the right approach to the economy. That is what our fiscal rules demand, and that is what we will be held to.
Harriet Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, Next have said that they're going to increase prices by 1% directly because of the increases to NICs, and they're warned of slowing growth. So with business confidence plummeting, gilt sat at a 26-year high and growth stagnating, does this government still maintain that they have an iron grip on public finances, or will they admit that their budget has done exactly what these benches warned, which was increased costs, increased prices and reduced growth?
Minister.
The question, Mr. Speaker, is whether the government has an iron grip on public finances. The answer is yes.
Parim.
Muras have Mittendam, Mr. Speaker. Does the Chief Secretary agree with me that the only way that we can wrest the economy out of the clutches of the Conservative doom loop is to go for growth? And to underpin that growth, the government's new industrial strategy will be a core foundation for that growth.
Yes, my honourable friend is absolutely right. Whether it's our industrial strategy, investing alongside business and industries of the future, or our infrastructure strategy, setting out how we're going to get Britain building again, these are two examples of where the government is playing its part by bringing economic and political stability, by reforming areas like the planning system, and as a consequence, unlocking billions and billions of pounds of private sector investment into UK PLC, something that did not happen under the last government.
Paul Collar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I completely sympathise with the Chief Secretary, the incredible brass neck of the official opposition. But he talked about kick-starting growth. Can you give me any evidence that growth has been kick-started? And can you, the Minister, not realise that the only way to kick-start growth in the near future is to re-engage with Europe?
The honourable member will note that the approach of this government to stimulating growth in the economy is around stability, investment and reform. Political and economic stability that the Chancellor has brought to this country, investment from private sector partners as well as from the state where appropriate, and reform of areas of policy, for example in planning or the financial services reform that the Chancellor set out at the Mansion House speech. He's also right, of course, that we need to improve our trading relationship with countries around the world. That's why the Chancellor is going to China today, and it's why we've begun negotiations with our friends in the European Union to think about how we can improve our relationship on a whole host of issues around trade, energy and defence and security.
Joe Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Chief Secretary agree with me that having added gutter politics to their fancy economics and unfunded spending commitments, that the party opposite can no longer call themselves the party of decency in public life and sound money?
Minister.
Yes.
Wendy Moore.
Mr. Speaker, it's deeply disappointing that the Chancellor isn't here today to answer questions in the House on such an important topic. So I shall have to ask the Chief Secretary to the Treasury my question instead. It's actually quite a very simple one, which is, will he stand by the Chancellor's comment that she won't come back with more tax increases?
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint the Right Honourable Member, Mr. Speaker, but I will answer the question nonetheless. She's asked me whether I stand by the Chancellor's statements, and the answers are yes.
Let us see. Louise Jones.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Just want to get serious for a minute here. Many of my constituents in North East Derbyshire will have just heard the guffawing opposite, actually. Many of them have been really struggling with the cost of living crisis, actually really struggling. They voted this government in, and we are committed to restoring the foundations of our economy. Can the Minister assure me that we are doing everything we can to deliver on that promise?
Minister.
It's absolutely right that this Labour government is bringing fiscal and economic stability back to this country, because we know that when you play fast and loose with the nation's finances, you play fast and loose with family finances. That's what voters across every constituency in this country experienced when the Conservatives were last in government, and they will not experience that under this Labour government.
Graham Stewart.
Mr. Speaker, with higher interest rates, lower growth and a higher cost of borrowing to the government, as my honourable and right honourable friends have said, we're grateful to the Secretary to the Treasury, Chief Secretary, for being so honest with the House. It's quite clear there isn't going to be, if he sticks to his word, any more borrowing or any more taxes. So that only leaves one option, given the numbers, and that is going to be cuts in public services. And I wonder whether his colleagues behind him on those benches realise that that is the reality. What word is he going to use other than austerity to describe it?
As I've said, Mr. Speaker, it seems the Conservative Party is very proud of their record on austerity. We do not support austerity. Austerity was blind, ideological cuts to public services, -3% cuts, irrespective of the outcome for people that rely on public services. The Chancellor increased investment in public services at the budget in autumn. We will continue to increase investment in our public services because we need to get them back on their feet, and they're an important part, an important foundation for economic growth in this country. I'm pleased that the honourable gentleman recognises my statements and says that they're honest, because of course they are. I look forward to coming back to the House in future months and years to show him the progress this government is making.
Sally Jameson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a relief for me and my constituents in Doncaster Central that we finally have a Labour government that's providing economic stability and actually investing in the industry of the future. So it's all right chuntering on the opposite benches. I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, that after the mess they made, a period of silence on their part is warranted at this juncture. So can my right honourable friend lay out what action he is going to take to ensure that all regions of the country in places like Doncaster and South Yorkshire benefit from growth?
My honourable friend is absolutely right to point out that this government is in the service of working people. What does that mean? It means that people's lives, the money they've got in their pocket, the ability to pay the bills, the ability to get a roof over their head, the ability to seek opportunity in this country is at the very heart of what it means to be in the Labour Party and in this Labour government. Members on the benches opposite might not have suffered from higher mortgage bills or worrying about the cost of living for their supermarket shop each month, but people across this country did, and they suffered as a consequence of their behaviour. So I welcome her commitment that they should have a period of silence whilst they learn the lessons.
Neil O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I heard the Chief Secretary say that the Chancellor hasn't gone to China. Can you just confirm, firstly, that she is still planning to go? Second, can he say, if she's not gone to China yet, why is she not here today? I think lots of people would like to hear from her.
Yes.
And third, would she confirm, has the Chancellor talked to the Governor of the Bank of England about the market turbulence at any point in the last 7 days?
Minister.
The Chancellor is going to China, has been well documented. And again, I'm sorry to disappoint the honourable member that I'm here. I would just refer him and his colleagues to the title of the urgent question. The title of the urgent question is about a statement on borrowing cost and public finances. He will know I'm the Minister for Public Finances, which is why I'm here answering his questions.
Gregor Poynton.
Can the Chief Secretary of the Treasury confirm that this government's #1 mission is still growth? Because growth is the only way we can break out of the Tory inheritance of low growth, high borrowing, high taxes and squeezed living standards for the people of my constituency in Livingston and across the UK.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, because his constituents will know when they're thinking about their family finances, they can't just put the bills every month on the credit card with no plan for how to pay it off. That is not a sustainable way to manage your finances. And it's the same for the country. One of the reasons we've had such a mess left to us by the Conservative Party opposite is because they did just that. Every month, borrowing money to pay for the day-to-day bills, stacking up the promises. This is why in the end there were so many promises and not enough pounds to pay for them. That is not a way to run the economy. That is not a way to run family finances. That's why fiscal responsibility is at the heart of the approach taken by the Chancellor in this government, and we will never play fast and loose with the nation's finances as the party opposite did.
Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today's media reports that the former member for South West Norfolk is issuing cease and desist letters to those who accuse her of crashing the economy. I wonder whether the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, well, I hope not. You'll be conscious I'm being very careful with my wording. I wonder whether the Chief Secretary of the Treasury might want to take advantage of parliamentary privilege to compare and contrast the impact of her disastrous mini-budget with what is being discussed today.
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, you will rightly tell me it's not right for me to comment on legal proceedings, but I am very happy to say that, of course, one of the huge lessons for this country and for the British voting public, and perhaps someday for the Conservative Party, is that the actions that the Conservative Party took were not just reckless and negligent. They had a direct impact on family finances in every single constituency across the country. It was a direct connection between the hubris and the ego and the lack of focus on working people that Conservative ministers took when they were in government last time that ruined the lives of people across this country. I'll say that today, I'll say it every single day, because the British people must never forget the recklessness of the Conservative Party.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Chief Secretary for his statement. In this session alone, we've heard the bench...
UQ today, Robert. It's an urgent question, not a statement.
Oh, sorry. just in this statement, this UQ is urgent question alone. We've heard chuntering from the benches opposite about the cut to the winter fuel allowance. We've heard them oppose the increases in taxes in order to pay for the public spending. And we've heard them urging the government to call off talks with economic partners, including China. Is it any wonder that the GDP to debt ratio rose a full 30 percentage points under the last Conservative government?
I think, my honourable friend, look, it would have been a legitimate position, perhaps, for the Conservative Party to say that their economic policy was to borrow for day-to-day costs as they did. That could be a decision that they took. What is not forgivable is the fact they got to the point where they were making promises to the British people they knew they didn't have the money to pay for. That is where the £22 billion black hole came from. They should be ashamed of their record on the economy and apologise to the British people.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When will the Chief Secretary take responsibility for the actions of his own government? We had a general election. That's when the public held the previous government to account. They gave their verdict, and the Labour Party are in power now. What the public want is accountability on their reckless decisions, with increases in national insurance as an attack on jobs, an attack on the farming community, and business confidence at an all-time low.
Minister.
The right honourable gentleman may not wish to reflect on his party's performance in government, but I'm afraid he has to, because even though this is a new government, and we've been in for 6 months, the reality of the situation is that we are having to clear up the mess that they left us. That's why we have to talk about it and explain to the country why the actions taken by the Conservative Party not only affected family finances, but decimated the British economy and pushed public services on their knees. We are taking responsibility for clearing up their mess, and that's why we will keep talking about it.
Kevin Bonnev.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A key ingredient of economic growth has got to be responsible government. And the people of Stevenage and across this country are still paying the price for 14 years of irresponsible government, terrible decisions, a mini-budget, and now we have a party that's in opposition that still doesn't get it. They have come back. They responded to this party's budget by saying that they accepted the improvements of public services, but they wouldn't say how they would pay for it. Can my right honourable friend, the Chief Secretary, say that this government will be committed to responsible government for the rest of this parliamentary term?
I thank my honourable friend, and yes, I can. And look, there's no denying that the economic inheritance that we have been given by the party opposite means life is very difficult for this government. It means we have to take difficult decisions. The reason the fiscal rules are non-negotiable and public services have to live within their means is because that is the bedrock of any approach in government. Is that going to be easy for us? But it's part of clearing up the mess left to us by the party opposite, and from that we can build for the future, which is what's set out in the Prime Minister's plan for change.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The issue here is spending, and I'd like the Chief Secretary to confirm that the Labour manifesto said that they would increase spending by £9.5 billion a year, and the Treasury Red Book is increasing it to £76 billion a year. Isn't that the issue?
Minister.
One of the issues, Mr. Speaker, was that the party opposite made a whole list of unfunded spending commitments. They promised hospitals and train stations. They had unsettled pay disputes with public sector workers. You could go on and on and on. That is why the Chancellor has taken the decision at the budget to wipe the slate clean, to deal with the mess that we inherited, and then to bring forward the manifesto commitments that we set out at the election. And if the honourable gentleman wishes to see more detail about our public spending plans in the future, he's very welcome to come to my statement in June.
Jacob Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The party opposite talks about economic stability, but they seem to have forgotten that they were swapping out chancellors every 5 minutes. Does the Chief Secretary agree with me that it's this government that's restoring stability to our economy?
Minister.
Important, Mr. Speaker. When the markets observed the behaviour of the Conservative Party in government, it's no wonder they didn't want to invest in the UK, and why the market crashed to the detriment of working people across the country. Whereas it is very clear that under this Labour government, not only do we have stable leadership, we have a stable set of policies in our plan for change, and fiscal responsibility as the bedrock for the Chancellor's action. That is a country that people can believe in, trust in and invest in, unlike the country that was left to us by the party opposite.
Andrew Stone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Every Labour government leaves office with unemployment higher than it inherited and the economy in a worse condition than it inherited. But within just 6 months, to see borrowing costs spiralling out of control, to see GDP growth tanking, to see the bosses of some of the biggest recruitment firms in the UK warning of job postings plummeting and that a recession is just around the corner. I think this Labour government is taking the record for doing that the fastest we have seen, and I will look forward to seeing how the Chancellor spins this period of employment on her CV in the future. So what I'll ask quite clearly is, if the government breaches so ingloriously and so quickly its own fiddled fiscal rules, who on the Treasury bench is going to update their CV and take responsibility?
Mr. Speaker, the fiscal rules are non-negotiable and they will be met.
Lila McAvoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree with me that the reckless ideological austerity measures taken by the party opposite in government have directly led to my constituents being significantly worse off, and it's been harder for them to get on in Darlington? Can the Minister outline what the impact of the new Office for Value for Money will have on the huge inefficiencies and waste that the last government presided over in government?
I thank my honourable friend for her question. The Office for Value for Money is an important part of our spending review process, as we, for the first time in 17 years, undertake a zero-based review of every single pound of public spending. We should just focus on that for a moment, Mr. Speaker. Not once under the last Conservative government was there a zero-based review. Not once did they go line by line through every pound of taxpayers' money in public spending to check it was being spent in the people's interest. Not once did they think that was a responsible thing to do. That's the first thing we're doing in government.
Neil Shastri-Hurst.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. At the back end of last year, borrowing costs or borrowing figures were the second highest monthly figures on record. This was not in no small part driven by the Chancellor's decision to give above-inflation busting pay rises to unions. Given that we've got more pay union negotiations this year, should my constituents be braced for the government giving in to those union demands at the risk to taxpayers?
Minister.
I think the honourable member might want to ask his constituents whether they appreciated their doctors and nurses being on strike for so long, or whether they wanted them to be able to see their patients. He may want to ask his constituents whether they were grateful for so many months to have the trains not working because the train drivers were on strike. He may want to ask his constituents how pleased they were with the performance of their public services over the last 14 years in government. I think I probably know the answer they would give him. That's going to change under this Labour government.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the economy, as with so much else, does my right honourable friend agree with me that honourable members opposite should sip from the elixir of personal responsibility, and that the two words that we most need to hear from honourable members opposite are, "We apologise"?
My honourable...
Order. Miss Stewart, I need no advice from you. I think you are on the panel, and I don't need to see some better behaviour if you're going to stay on it, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's important when you're paid by the House to act responsibly. I agree with you. Look, my honourable friend makes a really important point, and members opposite who have their heads in their hands may wish to listen to him. Look, I think it's going to be very important for the Conservative Party to apologise for their behaviour before the British people start listening to them again. But for as long as they wish to grunt and groan and claim that everything was wonderful, the better for us, and so long may it continue.
Mr. Speaker, I heard this minister is the future, but all he wants to talk about is the past. The fact of the matter is, today, borrowing costs are up, business confidence is down, and growth is going nowhere. Is it not time to admit this lefty economic experiment is not working? It is time to cut taxes and cut spending.
I didn't realise, Mr. Speaker, that the honourable member knew my mum, that I'm apparently the future. I mean, it's very kind of him to say so. Very few have that in their thoughts. But look, he talks about lefty experiments. Fiscal responsibility is not a lefty kind of ideology. Economic responsibility is not a lefty ideological political experiment. It's what the British people expect. It's one of the reasons the party opposite had such a historic defeat at the last election, because they lost all control and all sense when it came to the public finances. For a party that, supposedly the kind of best performing party in Western democracy with great leaders in the past, isn't it a great shame what the Conservative Party has become? After its performance in 14 years and now its route into disinformation, I feel very sorry for members on the benches opposite.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope for my constituents in the country that he can turn this situation around and turn it around quickly, and I wish him all the best in doing so. I'd hoped this morning that, given the challenges for business confidence in the markets, that he would come with a plan laying out the scope of the problem and the solutions to fix it. Instead, he seems to have spoken more about the Conservative Party rather than Labour's plan for the economy. Is that because the Chancellor's not here today, and when will she come back?
I'm very happy to set out the government's plan, as I have repeatedly today. The honourable member would have seen it in the Chancellor's budget in the autumn last year, a very clear plan to clear to wipe the slate clean, to deal with the mess that we inherited, to protect working people and to invest in our public services. He will have seen it from the Prime Minister's plan for change, which sets out the directions to this government over the years ahead, that's going to put more money in working people's pockets across the country, get our public services back on their feet, and make sure that this country is in a strong position as opposed to a weak position. And he will know that the government is working through its spending review, which I run as the responsible minister. I've already confirmed we will come back in June to confirm spending plans for departments where they have to live within their means and in line with the fiscal rules for the years ahead. I can't think what more he would want.
Can I just say, I hope people who are standing in at the beginning aren't trying to get in later on. Katie Lamb.
Within the last week, has the Chancellor spoken to the Governor of the Bank of England about the impact of soaring borrowing costs?
The Chancellor meets with the Governor of the Bank of England on a regular basis and will continue to do so.
For the best, Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been widely reported that the Chancellor now faces a choice of raising taxes or cutting public spending if she is to stay within her non-negotiable fiscal rules. And with reports that she will now be conducting group meetings with ministers to discuss departmental cuts rather than the less combative approach of one-to-one meetings conducted by the Right Honourable Gentleman, it sounds as if government spending is being dictated by those ministers with the sharpest elbows. So can he reassure the House that there will not be any departmental cuts?
I'm pleased the honourable member can afford the subscription to Bloomberg News. I can't, unfortunately, so I couldn't read the article he refers to. But look, he asked me a question. He asked me a question inadvertently about the process of the spending review. That was the question, Mr. Speaker. We are embedding mission-led government. That's what the Prime Minister set out in his missions and his plan for change. That requires departments to work together to make sure that they're focused absolutely on delivery of the plan for change priorities. That's why the spending review is being done on a multilateral basis in a new way. I'm going to be giving a speech on this in a couple of weeks' time, and I'll make sure he gets an invitation.
Final question then, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for all his answers this morning? Over the last decades, the UK public debt has risen sharply, and at this moment, reaching levels not seen in the past World War II era, meaning a larger portion of our expenditure may be focused on paying back rather than opposed to public spending. I always try to be constructive. The Minister knows that. In relation, no more will the impact be greater than in Northern Ireland in health and education, as an example. So can I ask the Minister a very specific question? What discussions has the Minister had with the Minister and the Government Department, Finance Department in particular, at the Northern Ireland Assembly? Thank you so much.
I thank the honourable member for his question. I lead for the Treasury on interministerial relationships with finance ministers and involved governments. I meet regularly with my counterparts and will be meeting with them in Wales in the coming weeks to talk about our spending plans for the future.
That completes the urgent question. Let the front benches change over. Start it off. No.
We're all ready to carry on into business questions. I call the leader of... Oh, forgive me. I call the opposition shadow leader.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Leader of the House give us the forthcoming business?
Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The business for the week commencing the 13th of January includes Monday the 13th of January, general debate on hospice and palliative care, followed by general debate on the impact of food and diet on obesity. The subjects for these debates were determined by the Backbench Business Committee. Tuesday the 14th of January, remaining stages of the Renters' Rights Bill. Wednesday the 15th of January, remaining stages of the Non-Domestic Ratings, Multiplier and Private Schools Bill. Thursday the 16th of January, motion to approve the draft deposit scheme for drinks and containers, England and Northern Ireland Regulations 2024, followed by debate on a motion on the performance of the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. The subject for this debate was determined by the Backbench Business Committee in unallotted time. Friday the 17th of January, private members' bills. The provisional business for the week commencing the 20th of January will include Monday the 20th of January, business to be determined by the Backbench Business Committee. Tuesday the 21st of January, remaining stages of the Armed Forces Commissioner Bill. Thank you.
Shadow Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I start by wishing you a very happy New Year and all colleagues in the Chamber. I hope you had a zestful and restful Christmas. And I'd also like to pay tribute to those members of the House Service who have been honoured in the recent honours list. The New Year is always a time for new starts and fresh beginnings, a time when people step back, look at themselves in the mirror, pinch an inch or perhaps two, and perhaps make a few resolutions. Lay off the pies, resist the siren call of the cheese board, spend less on self-indulgences and more on things that matter, take themselves in hand and perhaps try to manage things a bit better. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government might consider adopting these New Year's resolutions for itself. After all, by any standards, its first 6 months in office have been pretty catastrophic. It's had 6 happy months blaming everyone else. Now it needs to take responsibility and lead. We've seen how the budget continues to have devastating effects both on key sectors and more widely. Just this week, the National Institute has warned that the UK economy did not grow at all in the fourth quarter. That was just only a few weeks ago. High street retailers have reported their worst sales decline since COVID, both offline and online. Business confidence is at a 4-year low. Employment continues to fall. Job vacancies, their lowest for 3 years. Only this week, we saw that long-term interest rates in the gilts market, as very well highlighted by the Shadow Chancellor in the urgent question we've just had, have risen to their highest level since 1998, 27 years ago. That's longer than the age of some members of this House, Madam Deputy Speaker, reflecting severe investor worry about Labour's spending plans and increased UK vulnerability to increases in the national debt. Now, the government can't blame that on the past, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a straight judgment on its own credibility, and it's costing this country dearly every day. The problem is not just that the government has damaged key parts of the economy with its budget decisions, it is that the long-term effect of those decisions is so counterproductive as well. CBI has calculated that the government's raid on inheritance tax will cost £1.25 billion more than it raises. Now, the Chancellor has said, and I quote, "I'm really clear, I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes," and last month she specifically ruled out an emergency budget in the spring. But the effect of these rising interest rates is to reduce fiscal headroom and make new tax rises or spending cuts very possible. Indeed, some would say almost inevitable. We must wait and see if that means emergency tax rises or an unexpected fiscal event in the spring with a detailed investigation by the OBR. But it also raises the question how the government can plan a spending review at all if it's not in control of the public finances. The damage is not going to be just to the Chancellor's own reputation, Madam Deputy Speaker. It will be to every member of every person in this country, every household in their pockets. So as we think about the new year, what resolutions should this House encourage the government to adopt? I would suggest 3. First, stop taking politically driven measures that actively hurt the economy. Stop punishing the retail and hospitality sectors that give so many young people their first job. Stop attacking farmers and the rural economy. Stop the madness of the Employment Rights Bill that makes it harder than ever to start and build a business. We should be celebrating and rewarding drive, energy, aspiration and entrepreneurship, not undermining them. Secondly, come clean to the people of this country about the government's own uncertainty, conflicts and incompetence. We've had endless announcements of new commissions and initiatives, each testimony to Labour's hopeless lack of planning before the election. We had a delayed autumn budget, and this year we'll have a spending review that, if it is not derailed itself by fiscal events, could easily last until June or July. It's all building up to a full year of stasis and stagnation since the general election. And a final resolution, Madam Deputy Speaker, might be this: show us some leadership. The Prime Minister pointed out, and rightly so, that in 2010 the incoming government inherited public finances in desperate need of repair. And he said, we cannot tax our way to prosperity or spend our way to better public services. These are refreshingly honest, cross-party recognitions of the difficulty of government. But when it comes to action, what have we seen? Dither, delay and divisive policy making. Reform of social care is a huge issue for millions of people across this country. It could lift huge burdens from the NHS, yet this week we learned that despite all Labour's promises of change, it has been kicked into the long grass. Madam Deputy Speaker, in closing, let me say this. This government was elected to own key issues and to address them, not to avoid the hard problems, parrot the usual political lines, blame other people and play nice to its friends in the unions. It needs to stop blaming others, get on and show the country it can lead.
Leader of the House, Lucy Pell. Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I also wish you and the whole House a very happy New Year. And may I send all of our sympathies to the residents of Los Angeles who are being hit by wildfires. The unfolding situation is very concerning indeed. Can I also take this opportunity to congratulate a fellow Northerner, Luke Littler, on winning the World Darts Championship. He might support the wrong football team, but he's been a great role model and is really making darts a very compelling sport. It's the new year, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I'm afraid it is the same old Tories. I mean, their decision to vote down the Children Wellbeing and Schools Bill yesterday was another huge misjudgment. They seem to have learnt nothing and are incapable of accepting they got things wrong or what it takes to rebuild trust. The victims of grooming gangs need politicians to hear their voice, to act without fear or favour, and to take all necessary steps to root out and bring justice to perpetrators and enablers, whoever they are. They do not need pathetic and blatant political bandwagon jumping. If the party opposite was really interested in the victims and justice, their leader would have met with victims, but she hasn't. When she was Children's Minister or the Secretary of State for Women, she would have acted or spoken in here about it. She didn't. If this was really about addressing the root causes and making sure our institutions, culture and laws are fit for purpose, they would have started implementing the recommendations of the J report, but they didn't. Their wrecking tactics last night showed they would rather play politics instead of supporting measures to safeguard children. And I find it quite depressing, Madam Deputy Speaker, to watch the official opposition chase the spectre of reform. These are very serious issues which require serious attention, with victims and their learnings at the centre of them. Now, he raises, yet again, the economy, but as ever, I'm afraid, Madam Deputy, I will take no lectures from the shadow leader. After all, he admitted himself that we inherited, and I quote, a struggling economy with anaemic growth. And our commitment to economic stability, sound public finances and meeting the fiscal rules is non-negotiable, as we've just heard from the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. We are only borrowing for investment, and we will see net debt fall. And as he knows well, the cost of debt fluctuates, often because of global markets. But I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is in stark contrast to the chaos we saw under his government when Liz Truss's kamikaze budget directly and immediately led to the gilt market crashing, needing the Bank of England to intervene to buy up government bonds. She might want us to cease and desist, but we won't cease and desist from telling the truth that they crashed the economy. And when we talk about fixing the foundations of our economy, we're talking about tackling the fundamental and huge structural problems we face. Years of low growth, very low productivity, chronically low investment, poor connectivity, a labour market with high levels of sickness and a health service on its knees, low skills and an over-reliance on record levels of immigration, which in turn puts more pressure on the housing crisis. There are no quick fixes, but it's why the decisions we've taken, like in the budget, are different. Our vision of sustainable, shared growth, and that begins with investment in health, investment in education and skills, investment in the jobs of the future, a pay rise for the lowest paid, investment in transport and connectivity, and providing decent homes for people to live in. Our approach is fundamentally different from the parties opposite: short-term, deregulatory, trickle-down economics. They can't have it both ways. We would have had cuts now if they had been in government, huge cuts to health and education. They can't have the benefits of the budget without the measures it took to raise them. Their agenda saw living standards fall for the first time in decades, stagnant growth, poor productivity, high waiting lists and sickness rates, and perhaps most telling of all, in their last year of office, net migration at nearly 1 million. We recognise it's going to take time, and we're beginning to turn the oil tanker around.
I'll go to the Chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tanmajit Singh Desi.
Thank you very much. In 1984, the global Sikh community suffered catastrophic collective trauma when the then Indian government ordered the storming of the Golden Temple complex in Amritsar, which led to devastating destruction and bloodshed, with thousands of innocent people losing their lives. 30 years later, to our shock, new documents exposed that the Thatcher government had helped their Indian counterparts by providing advice prior to that military operation. So in its pursuit for the truth and transparency, the British Sikh community duly launched a campaign for an independent inquiry to establish the extent of that involvement. Leader of the House, while previous Conservative governments have tried to brush the issue under the carpet, Sikhs expected the new Labour government to establish that promised independent inquiry. So, Leader of the House, when will that independent inquiry be initiated?
Leader of the House. Well, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this matter? I know it is of great importance to the Sikh community across the UK, and he's absolutely right to raise it here today and to continue to raise it on behalf of the Sikh community and others. We do need to get to the bottom of what happened, and I will ensure that ministers responsible are in touch with him to discuss this matter further.
Labour Democrat spokesperson Marie Goldman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to wish you a very happy new year. I think it's still okay to say that, right? Community pharmacies are fundamental to our healthcare system, providing essential advice and services while alleviating pressure on the NHS. We simply can't do without them. Indeed, we're all now encouraged to think pharmacy first for some medical conditions. But it's hard to understand how that's possible if pharmacies are facing closure because the NHS isn't covering the cost of the medications they're dispensing. The contract between the NHS and pharmacies has simply failed to keep up with the rising costs of many medicines. The result is that many pharmacies and pharmacists are operating out of their own pocket, taking huge losses year after year. The outcome feels inevitable. We've seen 1,200 pharmacies close since 2015, nearly 500 in the past year alone. When the Company Chemists Association reports annual average shortfalls of £60,000 per pharmacy per annum, can we really be surprised? We are warned by the National Pharmacy Association of pharmacy deserts, where many rural and deprived areas risk having no immediate access at all. This can only spell a health inequality crisis felt worse by those who already struggle the most. This needs to be fixed. We must avoid even more pharmacy closures up and down the country. Pharmacies are vital not just to the communities they serve, but to the NHS as a whole. So will the Leader of the House grant government time to a debate about how our pharmacies can be better supported for long-term viability and sustainability?
The House. Well, can I thank her for raising this important matter, and it was indeed raised, I thought, in very stark terms at Prime Minister's questions yesterday by one of her colleagues. What she describes as is happening in our community pharmacies, as well as in other parts of our broad healthcare sector, is a crisis. We are dealing with a very difficult circumstance that we've inherited after 14 years of underinvestment and industrial action and other problems in the health service. But she will know that this government is absolutely committed to extra investment. That's why the budget, which many have opposed on the benches opposite, not necessarily for herself, but many have opposed. We put record levels of investment into our national health service, and part of that is ensuring that we have services in the community, early intervention services, and our community pharmacies are absolutely central to that drive, and that's why the Secretary of State for Health will continue to support our pharmacies and help turn around this terrible situation that they face.
Sally Jamieson. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A recent report stated that there was an increased risk to life at Doncaster hospitals if a fire were to occur, and there is also risk of electrical failure due to the age and condition of the infrastructure. Despite much fanfare and promise, the last government did nothing to improve the condition of Doncaster Royal Infirmary. This adds to the fact that we have one of the biggest repair backlogs in the country. Can the Leader of the House ensure that a Health Minister meets with myself and other Doncaster MPs urgently to ensure that our constituents have access to safe secondary care?
Yeah. Leader of the House. Well, she yet again raises the important issue of Doncaster Hospital in her constituency, and I know she's doing really great work to highlight the problems that they are facing there. She will be aware, I'm sure, that the new hospital programme, the capital investment programme that was so-called there under the previous government, was a work of fiction, I'm afraid, Madam Deputy Speaker. There wasn't the funds there that our hospital needed to have that capital programme, but I will ensure that she does get a meeting with a minister, because the circumstances that she describes are unacceptable.
Chair of the Backbench Committee, Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and Happy New Year to you and to everyone. In addition to the business that the Leader has announced, the Backbench Business Committee has organised debates in Westminster Hall on Tuesday, forthcoming on 14th, railway services in the South West, and on Thursday the 16th, government support for the marine renewables industry. On the 21st of January, there will be a debate in Westminster Hall on the provision of auditory verbal therapy. And on the Thursday, the 23rd, a debate on the United Nations International Day of Education, and followed by a debate on the innovation in the field of rare retinal disease. And with your permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, on Tuesday the 28th of January, there will be a debate on road safety for young drivers. Now, I would ask the Leader that she's announced the debate on performance of the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. She will know that this was a debate that was frozen out before Christmas because the government put on a succession of statements and there was insufficient time available for that debate to take place. I hear she said that's an unallocated day, but will she arrange for it to be given protected time so that debate can actually take place in full? In addition, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have a very heavily subscribed request for a debate on Holocaust Memorial Day. Holocaust Memorial Day takes place on the 27th of January. Obviously, the Leader has not announced the dates for debates during that period of time, but it would be very helpful for all members of the House if she could indicate whether she will allow a debate either on the 27th or on one of the two Thursdays involved. This is the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, and very sadly, many of the survivors will not live to see another significant day. So I hope she should be able to facilitate. Now, in addition, Madam Deputy Speaker, yesterday, our allies in the United Arab Emirates announced the fact that 19 entities and individuals have been prescribed and put on their watch list for terrorist links across the world. Very sadly, 8 of those entities exist in the UK and operate freely and are not prescribed. So could we have a statement by a government minister early next week on what action the government is going to take following the actions of the United Arab Emirates to make sure that these Islamist terrorist groups who are linked to the Muslim Brotherhood are prescribed in the UK and not allowed to operate freely?
Backbench Committee, Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'll just pick up a couple of the backbench issues and again put on record my thanks to the Chairman, and I think it's great that he announces some of those debates. On the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency debate next week, which I'm pleased we have found further time for, I note that it is coming after a statutory instrument debate which would be limited to 90 minutes. So as things stand, I would be confident it would get the time. Should that situation change, I will of course look into making sure that it has sufficient time to continue on that date. On the Holocaust Memorial Day on the 27th of January, whilst I'm unable to confirm right now this date for the Honourable Gentleman, I recognise the very important issue that this debate brings to this House and how time sensitive that is, and particularly this year of all years. So if you would just bear with me, and I'm sure we can continue to have that conversation outside of the House. On the issue of the United Arab Emirates prescribing individuals, as he knows that we are close allies with that country, we work very closely with them, and I will ensure that there is a ministerial response on the matter and the subsequent action that the government is taking on those individuals.
Marcia Dickerdow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and a very happy New Year to you too. The listed places of worship grant scheme, it permits VAT to be refunded on some of our oldest, for repairs to some of our oldest church buildings as well as other religious buildings. And since its introduction under the last Labour government, the scheme has helped with the restoration of thousands of buildings across the country. That is why it is vital that this scheme does not come to an end on the 31st of March, as it would be near and impossible for many buildings and parishes to restore their spaces. So can we have a government statement on the future of the listed places of worship grant scheme?
Well, I thank her for raising that important matter, which I know is of wide interest to this House. It's something that has been raised many times over the years that I've been a Member of Parliament. I understand the concern about the deadline that is imminent, and so I will ensure that either she has a conversation or discussion with a minister, or a minister comes to this House and explains the future of that policy to everybody else.
Wendy Morton.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this week we're seeing temperatures plummet across the country. I know in the West Midlands we're expecting -6 this evening. So for those constituents who have been forced to apply for pension credit in the hope that they may be eligible for a winter fuel payment, I wonder if the Right Honourable Lady could reassure the House that they will all receive these payments in good time, because they are faced with that awful decision of how do they afford heating their homes.
Well, I recognise the issue that she raises, and of course temperatures are very, very cold at the moment right across the country. She will know that in addition to the support that's there for pensioners, whether that's the increased state pension this year, the record increase of applications we've had for pension credit, and that is being processed at pace. In addition to the £150 warm home discount, the extra money that's being distributed by councils to many pensioners, in some cases £200 and above, people will also be eligible for the cold weather payment